Welcome to English Literature and Critical Theory. In this lecture, we will discuss a great master and his equally great or possibly even greater disciple. The master is our Plato, and the disciple obviously is Aristotle. And the subject or the bone of contention, if we can say so, is truth, especially truth and literature. For Plato, the visible universe is not real. Yes, I repeat, for Plato, the universe or the reality that is around us is not at all real. It is a replica or copy of an ideal universe where everything is there in their ideal, pristine, pure state, and that is the God's world, or that world rather more accurately exists in God's mind. The moment God creates, then these ideas become manifest, and then that manifestation is what we call reality. But Plato thinks the ideas that precede them are the real things. While in today's reality or today's world, there would be many who do not believe in God, but there is still some logic in Plato's argument. Let us explain this. Plato says, for example, that if we draw a circle, suppose you are drawing a circle or I am drawing a circle, so prior to this circle that I am drawing, or that circle that you are drawing, or a third or a fourth circle that A, B, C or D will draw, there is an idea of circularity. We are only making manifest that idea of circularity which is in our mind. Without that, we would not have been able to draw the circle, right? It is logical. Then Plato says that that idea of that circle is the real circle. The circle that we are drawing is a copy. Similarly, and going in the way of, say, inductive logic, if we go back, if we regress, take a journey in regression, that we will find that the ideal circle exists in the maker's mind or God's mind. So is the case with everything. In your student life these days, often you make Xerox copies of books. In our time, it was not there, but we could not purchase every book, though it is never possible. So we used to take notes or whatever. So, but that note, handwritten from books, or these days Xerox copies, are actually Platonic copies. For him, the manifest world is actually a Xerox copy, not the original copy. Sorry, not the original. The original is in the maker's mind, and that is the ideal world. So, literature, it tells tales, tells stories about this world which is already a copy. So, literature or poetry becomes a copy of copy at two removes from truth. Literature about literature, so this criticism that we are doing now, would be at three removes from truth. So on and so forth. The idea of a philosopher is that the goal of human life should be to find truth, search of truth, search of selfhood. And in that, if we indulge in literature or poetry, Plato shows us that we would be led further away from truth. Our idea should be to go back by meditation, by self-control, by argument, by syllogism, by other philosophical methods, from the visible world to the ideal world. But literature takes us further away from this copy to another copy of copy. So let us go back to the example of the Xerox book or Xerox copies that we gave. Though we said that this Xerox copy is the copy, and the book which you Xerox from, a library book or teacher's book or friend's book, is the original book. But if you go deeper, you will find that those books are also not original, because there are multiple copies of a manuscript, whether handwritten or typewritten, which is there with the author, which had been sent from the author to the publisher, then printed. And also already when you are making Xerox, you are making a copy of copy, not copy of original, technically speaking. And these days sometimes there are Xerox of Xeroxes, because certain books are so precious. At least in our times it was there, but today most of the books are available in ebook format, however costly. There are certain sites, but anyway, so it is all about copies of copies of copies. So if you remember your favorite activity with book Xerox, because I'm addressing this to my students, primarily PG students, you will understand what Plato means. So let us come back to the idea of the circle or copy of copy. In the same way, he gives us the example of a bed made by a carpenter. All carpenters, make beds. So when they make beds, before making of that bed, there would be an idea of the bed in that carpenter's mind, without which a carpenter cannot make the bed. So according to Plato, that idea of the bed is the real bed. And when carpenter makes that bed, physically, that is already a copy of the ideal bed. So it is a bad bed, we can say, bad bed. Now, we come a little further. Suppose a painter paints a picture or draws a picture of that bed, or a poet writes a poem on that bed. Possible there are poems on chair, table, everything. So then those poems or those paintings would be a copy of copy and farther away from truth. So is the case with all literary representations. According to Plato, they copy things because literature is a copy of life. That was the original idea, though there are other ideas, but original idea of literature is that it reflects life or imitates life, etc. So whatever it does is copy of copy according to Plato, because according to Plato, life itself is a copy. It is not real. Its real nature or seed lies in the ideal world, which is the God's world or maker's world, whichever we would like to call it. Now I'm giving you another example. As Indians, you will find this more relatable if you think that way. Two of the major Indian philosophical schools, the Vedanta school of, we can say, Hindu philosophy, and Buddhist philosophy in general, they also hold this idea, at least partially, that the visible world is illusion, Maya. You will find it in many movies or maybe ads, advertisements, sab Maya hai. Though they do not say that there is a real thing corresponding to every Mayic thing in the world, but there is only one reality, that is Brahman. And the great philosopher of Advaita Vedanta, Shankaracharya, Adi Shankara, said it like that I am saying in half a couplet what is said in all books, that Brahman is the only truth and the rest of the world is unreal. And the individual soul is verily the cosmic soul. Shlokardhena pravakshyami yaduktam granth kotivhi brahma satyang jagan mithya jiva brahmana vaipara. So is Plato's theory. As a philosopher, he feels our duty is to search for truth, reach the truth with capital T. So if we want to do that, reading literature or studying literature or indulging in literature will lead us farther and farther away from truth, because they relate to what is already a copy. We will find similar ideas in all religions. Puritanism, Islam, or certain very strict forms of Hinduism also, not in general, that you should keep your mind away, keep your senses away from objects of sense perception. Plato also has this point, but then he hates or disdains literature the most. There is another point. In literature, especially in the epics and all that Plato was familiar with, even gods, because that was pagan time, gods were shown as having immoral activity. For example, Zeus having sex with Leda in the form of a swan, and Leda and the Swan eats as a poem. So if gods are shown to do things like that, how will humans behave? Plato did not believe that God did like that, but then found it to be human stupidity. As Einstein said, two things are, unlimited. One is the universe and the other is human stupidity. And he said, I am not sure of the first one. That is the universe may still be limited, but human stupidity is always unlimited, abundant, free flow, like Captain Cook's salt. Anyway, so Plato found all this to be stupidity and he banished literature from his ideal state. And since Plato was the prime philosopher of the Western world, and due to colonization, Western norms have become universal norms in many ways, whether you like it or hate it, we must be thankful to his disciple Aristotle that we get to read literature today and we enjoy literature. Because whatever Plato said was sacrosanct, as a famous European philosopher said that Western philosophy is nothing but a series of footnotes to Plato. Now, if these are footnotes to Plato, then we can say Aristotle to be the endnote of Plato himself. So powerful was the disciple. Aristotle's Poetics is basically a challenge to Plato's ideas of, or rather against, literature in his Republic. That is, literature, we would better say poetry, because the common term then was poetry, poein, not literature. But anyway, it's all the same. Aristotle's idea is that it is fallacious to say that poetry leads us away from truth, but in fact, it makes us reach greater, general, or universal truth. That way, taking us to the truest version of truth ever, just the very opposite of what Plato said. I will give an example to make it clear. But one point we have to remember, there is no direct mention of Plato anywhere in Aristotle's Poetics. So he has deconstructed or maybe destroyed his master without reference to him. This is also one way. As the famous story of Akbar and Birbal, you need not shorten a line drawn by another by erasing part of it. You can draw a bigger line and that line will automatically be shorter. So Aristotle did that, and Poetics was a far greater line, longer line, we can say, than Plato's Republic. Now, let us come to the example. We are all familiar with the story of Hamlet, whose problem was that his father was murdered by his uncle, which is not so much of a problem possibly, but the greater problem was that his mother married his uncle, and there is a hint at possible incest, because he was away studying in university in Germany, and there are indications in the play that Gertrude, Hamlet's mother, had already slept with King Claudius even when the old Hamlet, the king, was alive. Though there have been series of debates between or among critics regarding this, and the debate has been joined by arguably the greatest Shakespeare scholar from India, whom I think to be the greatest Shakespeare scholar. I'd be surprised to hear his name, is Utpal Datta, but not generally considered in the academia, because his main book on Shakespeare is in Bangla, and more than, say, around 400 pages. So he has engaged with this. But anyway, let us come back to the point. So Hamlet's main issue in that play is dilemma. To be or not to be, that is the question. While this also has had several meanings given by several critics, but at the root of it, this is what, basically, whether he should take action or whether he should resign to destiny. There are certain moments in our life when we are always faced by this kind of dilemma. Take a simple example as your course of study, whether you should do MA English after BA, or go for some more career-oriented courses, or go for marriage, or study for competitive exams, get a job, etc., etc. Even when doing MA English, you may be tempted with options during the course itself. There are many options that we give, whether it is better to choose translation studies or gender studies, for example. Everywhere in life, if you are a thinking man, thinking woman, you will find this problem of conscience, of choice. And then this family betrayal, mother-son relationship and breakup, the betrayal of, or rather what he thinks to be the betrayal of his beloved Ophelia, breakup in love, and then tragedy. All these are universal problems. Yes, it may be quite possible that someone like Hamlet never existed. There was an old Hamlet play and a whole old Hamlet play also. According to Harold Bloom, that old Hamlet play also was written by Shakespeare, but there is no definite proof. But anyway, these are other things. But what I wanted to say is that the issues raised in Hamlet, mainly of doubt, mainly of infidelity, mainly of the problem with choosing the right action in life, what is right for one may not be right for another, are universal. It's very similar to the spirit of Gita, though Gita has given a spiritual solution and Hamlet, Shakespeare, has given a tragic end. Arjun, he doesn't want to fight. He thinks it's better not to fight. There may not have been a historical person like Arjun or Hamlet, but then their problems are everyone's problem. So that is the way Aristotle says that literature gives us truth which is more universal than either history or philosophy. Secondly, the other point of Plato, that literature promotes immorality. To counter it, he gives us the concept of catharsis that is often missed out by people. Tragedy, so not only catharsis but anti-tragedy. By seeing great people suffer due to their error in calculation or their some innate flaw, hubris, hamartia, all these things, we become aware and we believe we become slightly better human beings if we watch or read them carefully. So literature definitely has a moral effect or ennobling effect on us. And it is the very reverse of what Plato thought about literature. He concentrated chiefly or mainly on the immoral representations of God, but there are many other things beyond that. And then so that is why this universality of literature, of course I'm aware that postmodernism and other critical theories that came in its trail has found this problem, this universality, deeply problematic. But postmodernism will come after modernism, and modernism will be understood once we understand Aristotle. So let us start with this. So literature gives us universal truth, not particular truth, not limited to time, space, or person. And then, as he says famously, literature or poetry, Aristotle says, is not about what has happened, but what could or should or would happen within the ranges of probability and possibility. And in that he says, improbable possibilities are to be rejected and probable impossibilities are to be preferred. In other words, probable impossibilities are to be preferred to improbable possibilities while writing tragedy, writing plots. What does he mean by that? That I will explain in another talk. Or if you have some idea regarding that, please let us know in your comments. Thank you.